Welcome everyone to our fourth annual 2024 War Abolishers Awards ceremony. We are very pleased to have an incredible list of awardees with us this year. My name's David Swanson. I'm a co-founder and the executive director of World Beyond War. We are recording this event. If you are not a speaker or a host, you're not showing your video or able to unmute anyway, but this is being recorded. And yes, we will send you the recording and we will send you all materials that are discussed during the course of the event. We will hear from our 4 awardees, and then we will have questions and answers for all of them at the end. So please put your best questions into the chat at any point during the course of the event. Our first awardee, we have given the 2024 David Hartsoe Lifetime Individual War Abolisher Award to Susan Crane. And unlike the next 3, this first presentation has been pre-recorded because Susan is currently incarcerated in Germany as a result of her participation in a nonviolent protest at a German military base, where the United States military keeps nuclear weapons in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and basic common sense. Susan Crane is in jail for 7 months after having refused to pay a fine. Susan Crane, who has lived in Catholic worker communities, has done peace education and peace activism, including Plowshares actions, and war tax resistance for decades, and has repeatedly gone to jail for justice. She tells her story in a video that will be posted today on the War Abolishers Awards page of the World Beyond War website, and we will watch a portion of it now. The David Hartsoe Lifetime Individual War Abolisher Award is named for our other co-founder, David Hartsoe, who interviewed Susan earlier this year and who is among several people who are on this call who will be able to answer questions about Susan when we get to the questions and answers section at the end of the event. If you want to congratulate Susan, you can write to her and I will put her mailing address into the chat. In this video, the award was presented to Susan Crane by World Beyond War Advisory Board member Maria Santelli and World Beyond War Technology Director Mark Elliott Stein. Mark is also on the call. Let's watch the excerpt of the video.
All right, good afternoon. It's so nice to be with both of you. My name is Maria Santelli. I'm a World Beyond War Advisory Board member and the Executive Director of the Center on Conscience and War. And I'm joined today by World Beyond War Technology Director, Mark Elliott Stein. Hello, Mark. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
And we are here to present the 2024 World Beyond War Individual Lifetime War Abolisher Award to Susan Crane. Susan, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you so much for your lifetime of witness and your work. So, Susan, you're receiving the 2024 World Beyond War Lifetime War Abolisher Award because of your lifetime commitment to a world beyond war. Those of you who are just becoming familiar with Susan should know that Susan is a Catholic worker. She has spent time living in a few different Catholic workers around the US, including Jonah House, which is right here to our north of Washington, D.C. in Baltimore, Maryland. And the Catholic Worker Movement is a faith-based, nonviolent community of resistance. It's what really formed your sensibility to become a lifelong war abolisher.
Well, after college, I went into the Peace Corps, and I went to Ethiopia. And I thought when I went there that education was the solution to the world problems, and I was a teacher. I went as a teacher. I was trained by the Peace Corps to be a teacher, and I went and taught there. And I saw that there were corporations already in Ethiopia, and the U.S. military had some secret control of things there. And I saw that corporate influence and the U.S. influence was not helpful to the people on the bottom in Ethiopia. And I didn't know what to do about that, but I saw it and I thought, well, I guess I'm really not part of the solution being in the Peace Corps. So I came back to the US, and it was the middle of the Vietnam War, and there was a lot of resistance to that. And I couldn't get a job in my field, which was math. And so, because any place I applied for, they said, I'd ask them in the application, what are you doing to support the war? And they told me, they would tell me what they're doing to support the Vietnam War. And I'd say, well, then I can't work there with you. So I ended up joining a group of folks called the Radical Action Cooperative. And we were trying to live in a different way. We were trying to live as brothers and sisters, live without exchange between us, live without hierarchy, live in opposition to this empire all around us. And at the same time, we studied things that we didn't learn in college or high school that we should have learned about people's movements, about self-management, about workers, about unions. And out of that, we realized that we had to resist everything in this society. We had to resist the class. We had to resist the war making, the way hierarchy is just accepted as the way things are, the way war is accepted as the way to solve problems. So that was a big change for me. I learned a lot during that time. And out of that time, we became plumbers and electricians and printers. We decided to do things that needed to be done, to be workers instead of just thinkers, with the idea that everyone should be a worker, everyone should do work that matters in this society. And then, of course, I had some children. And when you have kids, you realize how precious that life is, that there's something just so sacred and special about this child. And then you realize, well, every mom and every dad feels that same way. And it really brings home that all life is sacred, and that my kid's life isn't any more precious or sacred than any other mom or dad's kid's life. And I was in prison. One of the times I was in prison, there was a guard there who was very interested in Plowshare's actions and interested in what change I wanted out of society. And we talked back and forth a lot. And one day he said, I finally found what the difference is between us. The difference is that you think all life is sacred, and you think your kid's life is sacred. But I think, he said, I think all life is sacred, but I think my kid's life is more sacred. I was resisting the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, and then Vandenberg Air Force Base, and then nuclear weapons and war in general. And then I learned about the Plowshare's actions. And I thought, this makes sense to me. It makes sense to start converting weapons into something useful for human life. And it makes sense that if blood should be spilt, it should be my blood. And so I was studying about that. And at the same time, I was studying about how to, studying with other people of how to prepare for a Plowshare's action. And we talked about fear and faith, and talked about how our faith that love is the answer has to be stronger than our fear of the consequences. And eventually I was very thankful to people that I worked with that I was able to do a couple of Plowshare's actions. and then go to prison and be with the most ostracized, lowest of the low people in our country, and realize that there are a lot of wonderful people. In fact, all the women I met, I would take home to live with me if I could. I met some wonderful women, and they for the most part were just trying to hold a family together, and they were trying to do enough work to bring home enough money to raise their kids, just like I was. Only they didn't have the education or the possibilities to just get a to get a teaching job or something, and they ended up doing other things that our society considers illegal.
So tell us about the latest action and what your thoughts are about facing this 229-day prison sentence, and that you are going to be serving a sentence that is longer than any other peace activist has been sentenced in Germany.
So I was living here at the Redwood City Catholic Worker, and there was a national Catholic worker gathering in Las Vegas, and I went to it, and there was a woman there, Marion Kupker, who, together with John LaForge, gave a presentation about this Buchel Air Force Base and about the 64 peace groups that had gotten together to make a camp outside the base during the summer. And well, just the fact that 64 peace groups could get together and do something like have a camp for a whole summer outside the base, I thought was pretty amazing. And Marion showed us pictures of the camp and talked about these weapons. I didn't know that the U.S. had nuclear weapons stationed in other countries, or maybe I had heard that, but it didn't dawn on me what it meant that we really had these bases around Russia, and that there were planes, fighter jets flying out every day on practice runs threatening Russia. So anyway, Marion gave this presentation, and she invited those of us who were resisting nuclear weapons here in the US to come to Germany and help them resist them, because they were, after all, our weapons, the US weapons. Made sense. So John LaForge organized, out of Nukewatch, organized a U.S. peace delegation to Germany. And I went that first year. And it was very exciting for me to have all these people coming together with the idea of nonviolent resistance against nuclear weapons. There was a certain joy in that, and it was amazing to me. People, young people, old people, people from the Communist Party, people from the Socialists, from the left, the evangelical Lutherans, the like moms with little kids, all sorts of people were there. There were youth groups there. Bus loads of evangelical Lutherans came for the mass, the peace mass in front of the base. It was like normal to be a peacemaker against the weapons, and the fact that we might block the gates, do a vigil, do a go-in was like a given. People didn't argue against that. We could talk about what we wanted to say. It was I felt at home. I felt very comfortable, and there was a lot of joy there. And there were other Catholic workers there from Germany and from the Netherlands. So we started doing go-ins, and it fed my soul. It was a wonderful thing. And so the next year I went back, and the next year I went back, and what was happening was the German people were getting called to court for the go-ins when we went on. The Europeans call, when you go onto the base, a go-in to the base. The German people were getting called, but the rest of us weren't being charged at all. And eventually then the folks from the Netherlands were charged. And then at the end, finally, they decided to charge us from the United States. So I went to court, and I thought that maybe I could bring up international law and bring up the reality of these weapons and how dangerous they are and how indiscriminate and, you know, the consequences of being around the radioactivity. And also I brought up to the judge that I lived in one of the richest areas in the United States, in Silicon Valley, and yet I worked with very, very poor people who don't have a place to live and live in the bushes and live on the side of creek beds and don't have food and don't have very good medical care, et cetera. And how can there be that disparity between the richest and the poor, you know? And then you look at the amount of money, as you were saying before, that's spent on war making and weapons, and it's just so wrong. It doesn't make any sense. And we act like that's normal. We act like that's the way it is, that you can't even question it. Well, so I was questioning it and bringing it up in court. But the judge thought that I should have remorse. And found all of us guilty. We weren't on trial. We were in trial individually. I was anyway. And I appealed, but the appellate court wouldn't listen either. You know, I think someone looking at the case would say, well, actually, you are right, but the international law states that Germany can't have these weapons and they're illegal for other reasons. But they didn't say that. They took the side of the weapons being okay and I being the criminal. And so I was sentenced to 229 Tageszeits. And in Germany, the system's a little different than the US in that the sentence is based on my income. And since I have a Catholic worker income, it's very low. But so I have a fine, a per day fine. But whether it's €5 or €100, I say I'm not guilty. And I'm not going to just solve this by paying money. Sort of like in the US, we try not to pay bail. We try not to pay fines. We say we haven't done anything wrong. And if you're going to jail me, but that's it. And so I said the same thing here. And so I'm going back to go to jail, prison. Thank you so much. Thank you, World Beyond War, and thank you.
So if you have questions about Susan's work, please put them in the chat and put questions about any of our other awardees we're about to meet in the chat. With that, I want to bring up the introducer of our next awardee. Ed Horgan is a board member of World Beyond War based in Ireland. Ed, can you please take the floor?
Thank you very much, David. Hello, everyone, and a special hello to Editor Coriani and Rana Salaman, and to all members of Combatants for Peace. Working for peace and justice can be both dangerous and challenging, but it is always right, and it can bring its own inner peace to peace activists. Standing idly by in the face of death and destruction and grave injustices should no longer be an option. There are personal risks involved, but such risks for peace must be undertaken. Being a peace activist in times of war in your own country is especially difficult, as our World Beyond War colleague Yuri Shelyavenko has experienced in Ukraine, and I'm sure members of Combatants for Peace are experiencing in Israel and Palestine. Mordechai Vanunu has also suffered for his courageous whistleblowing on Israeli nuclear weapons. It's a special honour for me to be asked to present this organisational War Abolishers Award to Combatants for Peace, and more especially to Editor Coriani and Rana Salaman. I first visited the West Bank in 1966, just a few months before the Israeli occupation in 1967. 50 years ago, I served as a UN peacekeeper in the Sinai Desert, and experienced war and death in a very direct way. In 1984, I visited Bergen-Belsen concentration camp and later became friends with a Hungarian survivor of Bergen-Belsen. His name was Zoltan Denkolis, and we campaigned together to ensure that the Holocaust was not forgotten. Within the last decade or so, I have worked in and visited with peace groups, the Palestinian West Bank, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, Ukraine, Russia, and several African countries that have experienced conflicts. I mention this not because me or my work is not that important, but because I want to emphasize that we are all on this planet together, and we are all involved in and impacted by all these conflicts together. You are not alone, and we are with you in your struggles for peace and justice. We are traumatized along with you when we see and hear what's happening in Gaza and in Ukraine, and in the Congo and Sudan and elsewhere. In this present time, the Palestinian people are suffering occupation and war crimes that may amount to genocide. The Jewish people have also suffered catastrophically in the Holocaust. This in no way justifies what is happening at present in Gaza and the West Bank, but it is part of the history and part of the problem, just as the Al-Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe, is also part of the history and part of the ongoing problem with the conflict in the Middle East. It takes special courage at times like this for Palestinians like Rana Salomon and Israelis like editor Koryani to meet and work together for peace and reconciliation. The conflict in the Middle East, like the conflict in Ukraine, is a danger to all of humanity, but of course is a very immediate danger to the people of Israel and Palestine. There is no military solution to the Middle East conflicts, but there are peaceful, non-violent solutions. Last Friday, a glimmer of light and hope was created by the International Court of Justice. It issued a very important ruling or advisory opinion on the Israeli occupation of Palestine territory and breaches of international laws, including especially the Geneva Convention 4 on protection of civilians. There is a way forward out of the darkness of violence and wars. The work of Combatants for Peace also is both hopeful and creative, and it gives very positive examples for other peace activists to follow. The people of Israel and Palestine are not alone. All of humanity are in danger in this age of nuclear war and other weapons of mass destruction and grave injustices. If we fail to abolish war, then war will abolish humanity and all other living creatures on planet Earth. In this increasingly interconnected world, there should be no them, no others to hate or to fight against, just one interdependent humanity in a very vulnerable planet Earth. We are told that World War II was a good war, at least was a just war for the Allies on the winning side. The truth is that World War II was a truly dreadful war, and horrific war crimes were committed by all those involved. But World War II did lead to the founding of the United Nations and the UN Charter, and to a series of international humanitarian laws and conventions. Dictatorial regimes and violent non-state actors will often ignore and abuse the rule of law. Tragically, since the end of the Cold War, the rule of international law has been ignored and abused also by many of the most powerful states who claim to be law-abiding states. Thank you, Esther Koryani and Rana Salomon, for all you're doing for peace and justice. Peace without justice is just a temporary ceasefire, and this has been clearly demonstrated in the Middle East in every decade since 1948. We are inspired by your example and your work for justice. I am delighted to present this organizational War Abolishers Award to both of you and to Combatants for Peace. I now invite you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and the excellent work that you do. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Edward, for the beautiful introduction. It is with profound gratitude and humbleness that we, Rana Salman and Esther Koryani, co-directors of Combatants for Peace, join you today to accept the War Abolishers Award on behalf of our movement. This recognition is not just an honor for our movement, but a testament to the tireless efforts of every activist and supporter who has dedicated themselves to the cause of peace. In times like these, when conflict rages on and hope seems fleeting, the mission of Combatants for Peace resonates more powerfully than ever. We stand as a beacon of reconciliation and humanity amid adversity. The ongoing war between Israel and Hamas serves as a stark reminder of the urgent need for dialogue, understanding, and compassion. It is in these moments of uncertainty that our work becomes not just relevant, but crucial. Combatants for Peace was born from the courageous actions of former Israeli and Palestinian combatants who, after years of participating in the cycle of violence, chose a different path. They have come together not to perpetuate division, but to forge bridges of empathy and mutual recognition. Our organization embodies the belief that true peace can only be achieved through mutual respect, equality, and nonviolent action.
Also, receiving the War Abolisher Award is a validation of our unwavering commitment to ending the disaster of war and violence, not just in Israel, Palestine, where we live, but also around the world. It is a recognition of the countless hours spent on grassroots initiatives, nonviolent activism, educational programs, and advocacy efforts aimed at building a future where conflicts are resolved through building partnerships and understanding rather than through force. Even through these troubling times, we continue to work with determination to transform despair into hope. It is in this spirit that we held the Israeli-Palestinian Joint Memorial Day ceremony this year on the eve of Memorial Day for the 19th consecutive year. It is known as the largest joint Israeli-Palestinian peace event in history, in which we come together to mourn each other's pain, challenge the status quo, and set the foundation to build a new reality based on dignity and human rights for all. This year, we showed again that without a doubt, conflict and war are not a decree of fate. People create wars, and people can also put an end to them. We also held our joint Nakba remembrance ceremony this year for the 5th time, in which we commemorate the pain and tragedy of the Nakba, the catastrophe, when in 1948, more than 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled from their homes, became refugees, and had their villages and cities destroyed. In the aftermath of the October 7th attack, a second Nakba has been unfolding in Gaza, with over 35,000 Palestinians killed, many forcibly displaced, experiencing catastrophic food insecurity and acute starvation. Combatants for Peace understand that to end the occupation and find a solution to the conflict, we must listen with empathy to each other's experiences and acknowledge injustice in order to achieve true liberation for all of us.
Again, we would like to extend our heartfelt appreciation to World Beyond War for this prestigious honor. Your unwavering dedication to promoting peace and challenging the status quo inspires us all. Together, we are part of a global movement striving towards a world where war is no longer the answer, where conflicts are resolved through diplomacy and empathy towards the other. To all those who have supported Combatants for Peace along this journey, especially our team, activists, volunteers, partners, and supporters, thank you for your belief in our mission. This award belongs to each and every one of you who work tirelessly towards building a just, peaceful, and equitable future. In closing, from this platform, we reaffirm our commitment to peace and justice. We call for an immediate end to the war, and we demand a political solution to our conflict and an end to the occupation. Let us continue to work together across borders and divides to build a world where every human being can live in peace, dignity, and security. Together we can and we will abolish war. On behalf of all of us at Combatants for Peace, thank you again.
Thank you so much for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Everyone would be applauding, but they can't unmute. So you have to imagine a standing ovation. Thank you so much. And also for getting us back on schedule after I had gotten us off. And with that, I want to bring our president of World Beyond War, Kathy Kelly, who will present the next award. Again, everybody put your questions in the chat for all of these wonderful awardees, and we will get to them. Kathy Kelly.
Well, thank you, David. And I'm so impressed by all that we've heard so far from Susan and from Ed and Rana and Esther. And, you know, the words of Albert Camus, that words can be stronger than munitions, seem almost, you know, palpably graspable as I listen to you and to your words of acknowledgement about the suffering and pain that wars have afflicted, but the determination that we can abolish war. So you make us all feel a sense of healthy responsibility, as has the recipient group for the War Abolishers Award for Youth. The Youth War Abolishers Award is being presented in 2024 to the student encampment group at the Trinity College Dublin campus, which really fostered international solidarity with those who have suffered so desperately in Palestine, in the West Bank and Gaza, calling for divestment from Israel. And they had achieved something that, you know, we didn't really think was going to be so possible. And so Jenny McGuire is here to accept the award. She's the president of the Student Union. Congratulations for that as well, Jenny. And Jenny, we've so much to learn from you about how you accomplished what you did. You were a lead negotiator, and also about what you see as the way forward. So thank you, Jenny, for all that you've done, and we look forward now to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this award. Of course, I'm just the person speaking, but it was plenty of people that came before me and plenty of people that come after me that is the reason for this. So I have it with me, so I'll show it. But thank you everyone very much. To say how you know, we didn't know if we could do it is a sentiment that we shared for a long time. The BDS group was set up in Trinity College in 2018 by referendum within the student body. It was one of our, up until very recently, our most voted in referendum and passed by 80-something%. And so the tradition of supporting the cause of Palestinian liberation has been something that obviously is very important to Irish people. And so that is something that we have continued to build on, not just from 2018 with BDS being founded, but in a much broader tradition that extends far beyond us. And so I just like to take us back maybe to give you a bit of history of this encampment specifically. I've written a bit a personal history, but some influences as well. So it was on the 3rd of May of this year that a group of about 60 students and staff marched from Chockashay, which is where the union building is, right here in Trinity College Dublin, marched from here to Fellows Square, another square in the college. Following weeks of planning, 2 packed lecture theatres, which held meetings to plan and organise, and as well as engagement from encampments worldwide, students lined the staircase just outside this door and awaited to begin. They had their tents on their backs. We didn't know if the security were going to grab us. They didn't know what was going to happen. And we just knew to just keep walking and put your head down and get down and throw your tents down. And so it had actually originally been planned for the day following, but a far-right news organization under the name of Gript had leaked that it was going to be happening. And so the college locked down, but the students rose up and we continued our action. Earlier that day, both the incoming and outgoing TCDSU/AMLCT, which is the Guelga version, teams met for what became a tense 2-hour meeting with the president and provost of our university and the dean of students. This meeting came about following 4 disciplinary cases being launched against student representatives, including the outgoing president, myself, outgoing communications officer Aisha Wong, and the president of Trinity Postgraduate Workers Organization, Shahrun Sardina. Furthermore, the college had also fined this students' union €214,000 for various protests throughout the year on issues including rent increases and for calls for divestment and cutting ties with Israeli institutions. The provost had sent an email condemning staff and students, to all staff and students condemning the union. Shortly following the meeting is when the college locked down, and we sprung into action with little to no notice. People ran in. We were sneaking people in through. This university was founded in 1492, and so there's plenty of secret entrances in and out. And so we got people in because people viewed it as something much bigger than themselves. And it was at 8 p.m. that we walked across and we threw our tents down onto Fellows Square. A gazebo, which is usually used by the student union during the Freshers Week where new students come in, was set up in the center with tents forming an aerial formation around it. And benches were stacked in front of the most, probably our biggest weapon, which was we stacked benches in front of the biggest tourist attraction in Ireland, the Book of Kells, which is in Trinity College. And the president of the union, László Monarfi, posted a photo on X that said, the Book of Kells is now closed indefinitely. Cut ties with Israel. We received mass support both within and outside of the college, with a student newspaper, Trinity News poll, finding complete overwhelming support. The encampment lasted until the 8th of May, following 3 days of negotiations with the senior dean, the dean of students, a representative of the provost office, myself, the outgoing president, the chair of Trinity BDS, a representative of Academics for Palestine, and the president of the Postgraduate Workers Organization of Ireland. So everyone and their ma was there. But following an agreement in which TCD agreed to begin the divestment process from Israel, to set up a task force to investigate academic ties and to increase scholarships for Palestinians, the encampment was slowly taken down. I cannot describe what this was like to be there when this happened. I mean, we had people in the encampment that had been there from when BDS was set up within the university, people who'd been there, who'd been fighting all their lives for this, and it was a mixture of Irish people, of Palestinians, of Americans, of every representative, it was a wide variety of representation present. And so many of us, I just remember falling into the arms of an amazing Palestinian activist, and we just cried together because it felt like we had achieved the impossible. But something that we kept reminding ourselves and each other was that, that this fight isn't really about us, and it's important that we stayed grounded within the fight for Palestinian liberation, because it's something that we believe should come naturally to all of us. It's the case for humanity, that it's a case and a cause of justice and peace, and believing in the radical notion that the world can be better, that we can upset the status quo that seeks to enable this suffering. And that's why, this award, though I said I'm representing the students of Trinity College Dublin and BDS, it's not for us. It's a beautiful recognition, and we accept it and we thank you, but we recognize that we shouldn't center ourselves within this work. We have in other actions and throughout the year, we were criticized for being too radical or being too proactive, but the only radicalism that I accept of us being called is the radical act of acting within a community, of working in a way without consuming each other or prioritizing ourselves or over another. because of this is the way that we under capitalism have been influenced in our understanding of our very self. And our existence mustn't be mustn't be in productivity or to consume, but to exist in something bigger. And I believe something, so we kind of, when we reach the goal so quickly, something that we struggled, I kind of had to discuss with the 60, then 100 people, was that, you know, you're allowed to be sad as well that it's ending, because it created a sense of community that we don't get in our lives, and that has been taken from us, and that is so natural to us. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like, I cannot, and it was just people together fighting for peace and an apartheid-free campus and just a better world. I would caution, though, of course, and a discussion that kept coming up within the encampment, is that, you know, that we remove ourselves from this, and that often in my position as someone who is thousands of miles away from the heart of the conflict and from the people at the very center of it, you know, I my island has seen such violence and occupation for 700 years, and plantation and violence through politics, through blood on the street, and through bombs in schools and buses. And these acts of violence, though painful to our humanity, were done so out of desperation and of no other option. But our task now is not to, you know, look back and police, but to build forward and to build a world that is justice led and that is led for peace. And that must be the direction that we continue to go. And that's what these actions represent. Gléir míle mágah gach duine. Tá granam timnatha don Palestine. Gléir míle gach duine. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. That's quite a challenge that you put forward to us, and it does feel like there's an awakening through the humble and yet clear language that we've heard from so many of the student encampment groups. And it's also quite wonderful to think of the intergenerational reality that you're living in a land that had experienced occupation and the consequences of occupation, which might have stirred hearts to be more open. I wonder, before we say goodbye and move on, do you have any sense, Jenny, of how Ireland might respond to the International Court of Justice's ruling that the Israeli occupation itself is something to be declared illegal? It's difficult to see the kind of implementation that your student encampment groups achieved, as you say, relatively quickly. But do you have any thoughts about Ireland in relation to that ruling?
I think Ireland prides itself on its uniqueness, but I think sometimes there is a differentiation between the Irish people and the acts of a government that exists obviously within the same global structures that every other country exists in. And so, you know, we are a country that overwhelmingly would support the cases of the ICJ. But there's issues with having actual action that goes behind through government policy and international pressure. We saw, of course, Ireland's recognition of the state of Palestine a few months ago in May. But this is something that we can only hope brings more pressure on our government to lead the way. I mean, Ireland was the first Western nation to stop trading with South Africa during apartheid. And it's something we pride ourselves on. I was only in a museum yesterday where it was up on the wall about it. And so I just hope that we can continue to lead the way and inspire others, hopefully. That's what I believe Ireland can do.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to get to know you through this process, Jenny, and we wish you the very, very best, you and the Student Union, as you look toward resumption of the learning process, and we'll keep learning from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, we can turn it back to you. Thank you.
Congratulations to Jenny. Thank you, Kathy. I think everyone is cheering, but are silenced by being muted. We can tell from the chat that everyone is quite impressed and congratulatory here. We're looking forward to questions and answers at the end of this program. Now, our fourth and final awardees, it is my great privilege to announce that the 2024 Lifetime Organizational War Abolisher Award goes to No to War, No to NATO, an international network that has led the way in educating on alternatives to NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and in organizing protests, demonstrations, creative actions opposing NATO's militarism since 2009. The network includes 650 organizations in over 30 countries and has organized protests and counter summits at NATO meetings year after year. No to War, No to NATO has been a big part of planning the counter summit and rally just held on July 6th and 7th in Washington, D.C. Accepting the award today and telling us about their work will be 4 or possibly 5 leading individuals in the coalition. Christina Karsch is from Germany and is co-chair of the No to War, No to NATO coalition. Rainer Braun, also in Germany, is or not in Germany, but from Germany, is a founding member of No to War, No to NATO, and former executive director of the International Peace Bureau. Kate Hudson in the UK, or from the UK, is a founding member of No to War, No to NATO, and general secretary of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Ludo de Brabander is from Belgium and is a Belgian peace activist, spokesperson for the organization Vrede, which means peace. He is a member of the International Coordinating Committee of No to War, No to NATO. And I'm not sure whether Ariel has joined us or not, but Ariel Denis in France is a founding member of No to War, No to NATO and vice president of the International Peace Bureau. So let me try to spotlight all of these wonderful people and turn it over to them.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are you sharing my PowerPoint?
The minute you tell me to share your PowerPoint, I am sharing your PowerPoint.
Yeah, and you can click it
Okay.
after, I think,
Coming, let me
a minute or something like this.
Try and share the PowerPoint now.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah. Here you see our actually in Berlin located award. Many thanks to World Beyond War for presenting this award to the international network No to War, No to NATO. It is an honor and distinction for us that our 15 years of work is delegitimated NATO with the aim of abolishing it, has been recognized with its prestigious award. This award is a great encouragement for us to continue our work after the War Summit in Washington. And also to further expand our cooperation with World Beyond War. Only through cooperation and diplomacy can we overcome the logic of war and the associated militarism and promote alternatives such as common security and diplomacy. Since 2009, the network has been preparing counteractions together with local peace groups, usually with the counter summit demonstrations and actions of civil disobedience. The network was set already, and our founding declaration from 2008 is still relevant, and the threat of wars has never been as high as it is today. We know that when we talk about the world's war, NATO is almost always at least partially responsible and is often the most determined warmonger. With the development of global NATO, the danger of war has been and will continue to increase, up to the danger of a third world war. In the future, we will continue to do everything we can to put this largest military alliance to mankind, where it historically belongs in the dustbin of history. Thank you. And as next speaker will be, I think she isn't arrived, Ariel, afterwards Ludo, then Kate, and at the end, Ryder. Take the next slides. It's only some pictures to show our work. It will be on our website. I sent the link in the website, and then you can look exactly what's on. I think Ariel is not arrived. Rainer, you are muted. So,
Ludo, floor is to you.
Thank you all. Well, I don't know if you want to show all the slides of the summits. I think meanwhile we have had around 12 counter summits since 2009 and 2010 Lisbon. There was Chicago in 2012, Wales, Warsaw in 2016, and then it became like a yearly NATO summit, and we also had to force ourselves to be present in those counter summits. I'm living in a country that hosts the political headquarters of NATO and also the military headquarters shape that commands all NATO operations. And on top of that, we have also US nuclear bombs in the airbase in Kleine Brugel. So let's say that we feel like the militaristic pressure and presence of NATO in our daily lives in that way. So I think as a movement, as a peace movement, although many common people think that NATO is guaranteeing peace and stability, we need and to continue to unmask that image, because it's quite the opposite. If you look to the NATO history, it's soaked in blood. It has been involved in colonial wars and all kind of other wars during the Cold War, and also after that. We know what happened in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, the intervention of NATO, Libya. Some of the NATO members have attacked, for example, also Iraq. So it's not at all about peace and stability. It's that's the propaganda that says it. But let's say NATO members are for defending their interests, and especially US, that says we need to be to continue the only superpower in the world, and that's why they call countries like Russia and China systemic rivals. And so this is the true face of NATO, defending its geopolitical interests, their economic interests, and let's say the military apparatus is like a kind of the extension of that interests in case they should defend it militarily. So, and I think there are many reasons why we should oppose NATO and why it's important to oppose NATO. Among many things is, of course, their contribution to carbon emissions. Lately, there was a new report that showed how much when it would be a country, it would be in the top 30 or 40 of countries' emissions, NATO alone. And of course, it's also the alliance that continues to invest in nuclear arms and is, let's say, pushing this confrontation policy that also has this nuclear danger and nuclear potentially the nuclear escalation in it. So yeah, I won't say much more because there's Kate and Rainer, but let's say I think we hope in the future that we can really convince many people of this true face, that we can unmask NATO, and of this true face of NATO that doesn't want peace in Ukraine, for example, in its proxy war with Russia, and that hopefully in a few years we can abolish NATO. Thank you.
Kate, the floor is to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Rainer, and an enormous thank you to World Beyond War for presenting this award to our fantastic NATO network. And this honor has made me look back a little bit and reflect on the work of our network and what it's actually meant for CND, because I am accepting this, of course, on behalf of CND. And I would say that truly it's been a massive source of strength and political support to our organization and to other supporting organizations within Britain, like the Stop the War Coalition, for example. And the two years in particular where Britain, the peace movement in Britain, was able to contribute to the network and its anti-NATO work were in 2014, when the NATO summit came to South Wales. We had a fabulous counter summit with hundreds of people there. We had a demonstration up to the venue where all those NATO leaders were staying and having their conference and so on. And we were able to have an impact. But that impact would have been much lesser without that input, the international input from the NATO network. And it really strengthened our work and helped to build our movement in Britain as well. And again, in 2019, when there was a summit in London coinciding with a visit from former President Trump, we had thousands and thousands of people on the streets in London. We had a fantastic counter summit again. So I suppose for me, the lesson that I would like to convey is that working together and cooperating and sharing ideas and strategizing together, supporting each other, producing materials together, because all the statements that go out from NATO, they are the product of collective discussion. So it's a remarkable and long-lasting, fortunately, network. We hope we won't have to go on too much longer, because we hope that we will be getting rid of NATO. But again, thank you all, everybody, on behalf of CND.
Let me say, it was a great fun to work with and for the network. We were a great community, which were organizing and planning all the actions. We were next to each other even when we had political differences. And only because we were together and united, we could make it in very political, difficult situation. Can you imagine how difficult it is to organize a counter summit in Warsaw? Can you imagine what's happened in Strasbourg in 2009 when we had the first actions? When the chemicals were putting down on us, when a hotel was burned, and the police tried to destroy our activities and actions? So only the solidarity of our group, our common understanding that we can only win and survive when we are fighting together. This was, I think, the philosophy and the background of the success of this network about all the 15 years. And, I'm so happy to David and to World Beyond War, and I'm so deeply thankful that you were chosen our network, because it is a great help to see that our work was reflected internationally and accepted as an important part of peace work. We are not at the end. We are even in a much more difficult situation than 2009 when the network work starts. We were never so nearby to a global war. But I think with the solidarity, and now I mean the solidarity of all the awardees of today, I think we can win the fight for a more peaceful world. And this, I think, is for us the big hope, the great sign from this ceremony that we can see we can make it and peace is possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Rainer and Christina and Kate and Ludo. And I think we now will go to Kathy Kelly to ask questions of all of our awardees.
Well, yes, I'm grateful for the questions that have been put in the chat, and we certainly welcome more questions, but I hope it's okay if we start with actually a question that's being posed for Susan, and Susan can't answer for herself because Susan is in prison. But I wonder if some of Susan's friends might have any comments. I'm thinking about perhaps
Hey, it depends from the kind of question. Maybe you ask the question, then I can tell you if I can help or if some others can help.
Thank you, Reiner. And I was also thinking about Jack and Felice Cohen
Yes.
Papa, who are here representing the nuclear resistor, and that's such great friends of Susan. And then also David Hartsoe, who presented the award and has interviewed her extensively. But anyway, here's the question. It comes from Dr. Arthur Mulholland, and it's a very personal question. What would Susan's children and their father think about her peacemaking work? You'll recall that Susan said that she learned from bringing children into the world that the lives of all children are sacred. So maybe, I hope it's not asking too much if anyone could comment further on that. Felice and Jack, or David, or Reiner.
Well, this is Felice in Tucson. It's wonderful to be part of this program. And Jack and I lived with Susan many years ago in Ukiah with her sons, who are now grown and have children of their own. And I know their father has passed away several years ago, but was always very supportive of they were involved in a lot of the things that she was talking about. And she spends a lot of time with her kids and her grandkids, and that they are supportive of what she does. She's 80 years old. She's spending 7 months in prison. I can't speak for them, and I haven't talked to them. I don't know if if there's any concern, as a daughter or son might have concern, but they absolutely support what she's been doing all of their lives, really.
Thank you, Felice. Thanks so much. David Hartsoe?
I can just say that Susan really loves her children and grandchildren very much, and wanted to spend, I think, a special week or so with them before she went off to prison. And they love her, of course, as well.
Thank you, David. Reiner, I wonder, could we just ask you to comment on the kinds of bombs that are being stockpiled in Germany that Susan has protested? The B-61 nuclear bombs, I think, are being upgraded and increased. Could you comment on that?
Yes. We are just speaking about the airport Büchel. At the airport Büchel lying the US nuclear weapons, which are lying in Germany. These are about 20. The official number is unknown, but by the circumstances, it must be 20. They will be so-called modernized during the next 2 years. This means we have new nuclear weapons which are more exact and more detailed, and they have a new specific technology which brings them nearer and easier to the goals in Russia. They were under the control of the US during civil times, and in war times, German airplanes and German officers and soldiers are flying these planes. This is the so-called nuclear sharing. So Germany is engaged, and this was what David was saying in the beginning, that this is against the NPT treaty, because Germany said that we will never get any use, any nearby to nuclear weapons. So these new nuclear weapons are more exact, more details, and bring the nuclear weapons war much nearer than in the past. That is the background of this airplane. It's an airport called Büchel. It's in the middle of a wonderful region between the river Mosel and Rhine, and it is a US airport under the control and observation of the German Bundeswehr.
Thank you. There are 2 more questions regarding NATO, and one person has asked if NATO hasn't become the equivalent of a global criminal gang enforcing the demands of the resource wars of the United States and Western countries. And NATO enables them to continue waging these wars. It seems it's so ironic that Susan is put in prison when, in fact, you know, we're seeing a crime scene in the ways in which countries are violating the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which had been ratified. Would someone from No to NATO wish to comment on that idea of criminality?
Maybe Ludo and Kate share the answer.
Fine. Do you want to go first, Ludo?
You can, Kate. I can
Okay.
also answer.
All right. Okay. Well, I think there's definitely an element of that, but I think what I tend to focus more on the kind of big global political strategic picture, if I could put it like that. And it's something that Ludo often talks about. So I hope I'm not saying what you're going to say. But NATO is really the kind of military arm of US foreign policy, which was very clearly outlined pretty much at the end of the Cold War with the Wolfowitz doctrine, you know, which is the US had become the sole global superpower, and it was going to stay that way, and it was going to do everything it could militarily or in any way to maintain itself in that position. And that's what it's done. I mean, that's basically a summary of US foreign and military policy ever since. And of course, as we saw at the recent NATO summit, you know, the kind of focus is on, you know, driving Russia down, you know, and of course, the big challenge for them is China, which has risen economically speaking. So they've kind of got themselves in this position where they are determined to keep China down, even if it means world war, pretty much. You know, so I think that there are criminal elements. There is a lot of money making and profiteering going on, but there's also that kind of the political dynamic of the US determined to maintain its global domination.
Thank you, Kate. There's also the question of whether or not Jens Stoltenberg, the departing head of NATO, is actually predicting possibly 10 more years of war in Ukraine. And what is the future that you see for No to NATO work in terms of, well, particularly with regard to the war in Ukraine and European opposition to NATO?
Yeah.
Maybe Ludo.
Okay, Kate, go. If you
No, it's your turn.
No, I just want to say that I agree with what you said, Kate. As I also said in my introduction, I think you see it also. You know, Lord Ismay, who was the first Secretary General, he said, "What is the purpose of NATO?" And it never has changed. It's to keep the Russians out, the Germans down, and the US in. And you see it now, for example, in what happens around Ukraine. And then I come to this question that the whole sanction policy, the whole policy, which in my view is a policy of self-fulfilling prophecy, after years confronting Russia and trying to get Russia in the position that it acts against it, that it's exactly that you see Russia more and more banned from the energy market, to give that example, and you see that the deliveries, the import from US liquid natural gas tripled in 3 years' time. So it's just an example how NATO is kind of militaristic instrument to serve the interests, economic and geopolitical and other interests of those who are a member of it, and foremost, of course, the US as a leading nation and most powerful nation of the NATO. Concerning Ukraine, I think, you know, it's not maybe up to Stoltenberg to define if this war will continue in 10 years. I think in time, it will be clear and obvious that this war, it's already now, that is too costly in human sense, many people victim, but also economically and politically, and becomes too dangerous. And I think the readiness of many people in Europe to pay for this war machine, to continue that war going on, because there's a lot and amounts of arms deliveries, while at the same time, those in power say that we, like in Belgium, we should, you know, have budgetary limitations in investing in whatever climate environmental, social policy, public services. So this is something people won't accept all the time, I think. And so there will be a huge pressure politically to stop that war. Because that's the sole policy of NATO. At that moment, you never hear one of the NATO leaders talking about the need or even suggesting that this war can end with a diplomatic solution. So the only policy now, up to now, is a war policy. But I think the pressure will be huger and huger, and there will be dissent inside NATO maybe to more and more to talk about, to have discussions and to go towards negotiated solution. And I don't know when that can happen, but in my view, for sure, before the next decade. So it can be in next year, this year, even next year, or the year after. But sooner or later, there will be this. There is no military solution, and this will be clear, and then it will be a diplomatic solution.
Thank you, Kate and Ludo and Rainer. Jenny, could we go to you? There's a question. Well, first of all, there's been so much appreciation registered in the chat for all of you, but there is a question that's quite difficult, I think. It is about whether or not your encampment and the BDS movement, I should imagine, has been able to build bridges. The questioner used the word bridges to pro-Israel and Zionist groups. And if so, how have you navigated the kinds of divides that have been present?
Well, the presence of the presence of pro-Israel and pro-Zionist groups wouldn't be as large as in other countries in Ireland. However, as the president of the Students' Union, I have regular meetings with the chair of the Jewish Society on campus, who herself identifies as a Zionist, and we have discussions where I'm not trying to change her mind, or I'm not trying to debate her, nor is she trying to debate me, or what other people's views are, this, that, and the other, but to keep each other informed and to keep each other talking. I do fundamentally believe that, you know, if I was in someone else's shoes or someone else was in my shoes, like it's your life experiences and the world that is constructed around you that forms your viewpoint and it forms your thoughts. And so it's important to, I guess I keep coming back, like, decenter yourself and think and build those connections and those thought processes. It is something that's really complicated and difficult. I know, especially like with our encampment, we solely focused on, you know, our key demands of like boycott, divest, and sanctions, and now we are following up with a task force, and that is looking at academic ties. But I think it's important that in every process that we take, that we bring all of those within our college community along with us.
Thank you. I wonder, Rana, could we ask you if you could comment about that idea of Jenny had said we keep talking, we keep listening, but to keep the conversation going. Has that had bearing on your work with Combatants for Peace?
Well, living here, it's quite different than what is happening abroad. I imagine there's lots of polarization that is going on, and especially what we have seen maybe in some campuses, but we also have seen so many protests and nonviolent actions that are very inspiring and very empowering for us also here to see, because for so many times we have felt that we were isolated here and nobody has been talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict for a long time. And right now we're back on the table, and there are discussions for a political solution or like a two-state solution or any solution. But at the same time, we are also facing our opposing societies. So it's not easy to work, to do this joint work, especially as you mentioned, we sometimes we're being accused of normalization as Palestinians, or as Israelis being accused as traitors for working with the enemy. But we truly believe that the only way forward is by working together to end the occupation. for the sake of Palestinians and Israelis, because we believe in a shared future where everyone from the river to the sea will live in peace, in dignity, in security, in safety, with equal rights to everyone.
Thank you. And for both you and Esther, there is also the question, how can people help you? Esther, I wonder, would you want to take that question? How could people outside your organization be of assistance to the incredible challenge that you face?
So I think, just to follow up on what Rana said, to bring the message that what we actually need here is to show that there is another way. There is a possibility to choose humanity over choosing one side over the other, because after all, like, we probably will both stay here, both Jews and Palestinians, because if we don't, then it's again a huge catastrophe for either one of us. And if we in Combatants for Peace, we believe that there is a solution that can allow both nations, both peoples to live here in safety, security, and freedom. So to bring this message and to say, choose the side of humanity, choose another path that is not either them or one or the two, but like to think of a possibility that just to create a place that offers security and freedom and self-determination for both nations. And as we living on the land, also after the 7th of October, actually embody that it is a real possibility. We work together hand in hand to co-resist the occupation. We work to end it, and we work together while listening to each other's pain and also listening to each other's dreams.
I have a question about whether or not both of you see a feminist character when I think about some of the young women who have refused military service and gone to prison. And I hear the courage of it's incredibly courageous of you to speak as you do in the contexts you face. Is this something that, well, one person asked, is there a cooperation with Women Wage Peace? But I just wonder, is there also something that we can learn about what women bring to this effort?
Actually, for us as a movement, we reached kind of a milestone, because currently we're both female co-directors for the first time in 20 years in the movement, which started by ex-combatants, mostly men. And to reach to this point, it shows that we're giving the space to more women to lead the way, to be in leadership positions. And even like most of our programs and our memorial ceremonies that we hold annually, they were also organized and run by women. So we believe in the role of women. We give the space also to women, and we also have cooperation with different organizations. We're part of a big coalition of peace organizations, and Women Wage Peace is one of them. We try to create a peace camp, and we just recently on July 1st, we gathered together as a peace camp in Tel Aviv, raising our voices and demanding an end to the war, coming together from all aspects of life, and people who have lost loved ones during this long 9 months of war and long conflict for 76 years. And trying to reach our message to the world, locally and internationally, that it's time to end the occupation, it's time to end the war, and it's time to bring peace. This is what the people of the land need, and this is what we need to work for, and this is our vision for the future.
And may we also thank you for the website you've maintained. Somebody has just put cfpeace.org. Which is, you've got a new movie coming out as well. The trailer looks quite good. Jenny, could we go back to you with another question that has to do with whether or not the Catholic Church, particularly in the voice of Pope Francis, has been of support to what you're trying to pursue?
Yeah, well, I think we touched on the last point around how polarized the world has increasingly become. And I think in Ireland, we've seen groups that have had no allegiances to either side, take take allegiances on the grounds of other political ideology, which I view as unhelpful to everyone, and I think grounding it in the humans at the heart of it. Unfortunately, the words of Pope Francis have been are incredibly important, but in Ireland, because of the whole within an Irish context, the hold of the Catholic Church has such a negative consequence now due to various scandals and issues that have been inflicted on the Irish people. And so it's not as clear cut here as it would be, but I think it is important to look out for those us versus them notions that is created, and to realize the nuance and the gray in between. And I think those words are important, as well as various groups that would call themselves Catholic in Ireland and perhaps wouldn't take as nuanced a perspective. It's quite complicated here, unfortunately.
Okay, well, the call to set aside the futility of war certainly seems to have a uniting effect, and in that regard, we are all part of one another. I wonder, are there any other questions which people from World Beyond War, David or Mark, Gar, there are others, David Hartsow. Have you any other questions or comments that you'd like to offer as we move toward the close of our program?
I think you've done a wonderful job. I'll let others if they want.
And also, David, I do want to capture a question from you specifically that's already been asked, which is about how are the student encampments strategizing for international impact? And it may well be that anyone on the call would have further comments about that. But Jenny, could you comment on that idea of international strategy?
Yeah, but prior to our encampment, we were in touch with the Columbia encampment and various other encampments across the United States, and in one or two had been set up in France by the time we'd started. And it was about a shared information towards a shared goal. And after our encampment, the first thing, as well as publicizing our wins, our shared wins, was towards a island-wide call for to share what information we had learned. And from that, within an Irish context, 4 more encampments popped up across the island, all of which have stopped because of similar successes to us. And it is something that I think has left very permanent effects that we cannot take for granted, though, and that we must continue to build upon and revisit. And especially as the new academic year approaches, it's something that I am very much carrying with me for continued international cooperation.
Okay. Well,
could I ask a question?
Yes, thanks, David.
Given the war fever of the governments of Europe and the United States, is there increasing opposition by the people to NATO and preparing for war with Russia, especially given the loss of social benefits, where that money is going into war and weapons instead of the people?
I don't mind commenting on that if that's helpful.
Thanks, Kate.
Well, there are huge mobilizations taking place across Europe, and well, I can say that about Britain, but many other countries as well. But those mass mobilizations are calling for peace in the Middle East and calling for an end to the genocide of in Gaza, and there's currently relatively little focus on opposing NATO. There's relatively little focus, given the fact that the war on Ukraine is actually taking place in Europe. There's very little focus on opposing that war as well. And of course, what we've seen, Rainer was referring to this earlier, I think, how difficult it's been since the war on Ukraine began. It's become much more difficult for the peace movement doing its proper business of calling for peace, calling for a negotiated settlement, calling for an end to war, which massively escalates the risk of nuclear use. It's been much more difficult to mobilize on a kind of very popular level, because our governments have, particularly at the start, completely bombarded the populations with pro-war propaganda. So we've had to play an educating role as well as a protesting role. The whole question, of course, of military spending and the NATO demand for 2.5 and kind of massively increasing military production and orientation towards much more military-based industrial policies. These are things that we have to challenge. But of course, the economic factor does mean that gradually people will become more aware of the issues and about government choices about whether you spend on the military or whether you spend on things that actually benefit the people. So I would say it's difficult around Ukraine and NATO, but it's a process in which we are engaged.
Edward, I think what your point is not only a question. You were formulating the main challenges we are facing. We have now to do everything for mobilizing the people against the danger of war. And we are not weak, but we are absolutely not strong enough. And the biggest challenge for me for the period after the summer is to do everything that more people are awakened, that more people are going to the streets. And coming back to the award, I think the award is a big, big support and big moral help for our future activities. We see that we have friends and allies all around the world. And now it is a challenge to bring all the forces together and to unite us with the big forces in the society, trade unions, churches, and others for a mobilization against the danger of war. And you know, like me, that the new weapons the US will bring to Europe, the Tomahawks and the Hyperschall bombers and rockets, will enlarge the danger of war. So what you were asking is the big challenge we are facing. And I hope in 1 year, when we are talking again, we can say that we were doing our work. That's what we have to do.
Well, thank you. The words of Susan Crane at the end of the video spoke about the joy of resistance, and that was as she was getting ready to go off to prison. And so I hope that we can ourselves lift up and celebrate that joy of resistance, because we're going to need it. We will need that sense of relationship and the gift of being able to connect with one another. And I think certainly today, we got quite a strong dose of inspiration as well as challenge and a reaffirmation of the huge responsibility we all have to put an end to war, all wars. I'd like to take a moment to thank David Swanson. He works so hard, to put out the press releases and do the research and mail the awards, and it continued so many communications that are part of developing the different kinds of World Beyond War actions. And I'm so glad that this has become an annual event. To each of the people who participated, our sincere thanks. We wish you well. We wish you ongoing courage. And we hope that somehow through this awarding, we can also celebrate our interconnectedness. We really are all part of one another. So that's the end of my comments. David, how about you?
Thank you so much, Kathy. Congratulations to everyone. Very, very well deserved. We will email everyone who signed up for this event all information that any of the awardees can share with us. I know that Combatants for Peace has a film, Disturbing the Peace, that you can screen and organize an event in your community, and similar ways to reach out and promote and support each of our awardees. And we thank them for all the work they've been doing. It's very, very well deserved, and for being part of this event. And thank you to all of our hosts and participants, and to Kathy Kelly for doing a wonderful job with the questions and answers. Thank you, everybody.